Hello, welcome to the Zinniac PRINCE2 Agile training course. This is part one, which we did run last week, but we had some technical difficulties with the recording. The sound wasn't really up to scratch, so that's why I'm doing it again today. So if you joined us last week, I apologise for the technical difficulties, and hopefully we'll be okay today. And we will be able to leave the recording for other people to watch. Parts 2 and 3 are available on our YouTube channel. Please subscribe if you haven't already. And if you're enjoying the training, then please give me a thumbs up as well. Thank you. And I can see some of you have joined us already, which is great. So why would we use PRINCE2 Agile? What are we trying to achieve? Well, PRINCE2 Agile is designed for use on projects, and what we want is obviously a successful project. And there are three key types of success on the project. So the first and most important is obviously the success of the business case. Does the project deliver value to the business, to the customer? So that's number one. The second one, from a professional project manager's point of view, is have you as a professional project manager run the project successfully? Have you been in control of the project? Has the project been managed professionally? So that's the second type of success. And because it's PRINCE2 Agile, not just PRINCE2, we have decided to adopt an Agile approach. That's part of our tailoring of the project approach. And has that been successful? So what is the success or otherwise of Agile on the project? So we want success, and they're the three types of success we're going to measure the project against. So as I said, this is a replay of part one, if you like. We've already done part two and part three. I'm not going to do part two and part three again, or not in the near future anyway. They are available on the YouTube channel. So today we're going to be covering Agile, PRINCE2, and blending the two together. And obviously what we're looking for when we blend the two together is to get the strengths of both, so to get the best of both worlds, and having a successful project. Just to let you know, we are Zinniac is an accredited training organisation. You can see our certificate from PeopleCert there. I am a accredited trainer, and you can go to, if you like, you can go to Axelos.com and type in either Zinniac under the partners, you'll find us there, or Matt Trigg under the accreditations. You'll be able to see all my accreditations there as well if you're in any doubt. And obviously, as it's an accredited training course, there on the slide are the copyright statements. Axelos very keen that we show those to you, and they're obviously on every slide as well. In terms of the exams, you're preparing for either the foundation or the practitioner exam. The foundation is 1 hour, it's closed book. The pass mark is 28 out of 50 or 56%. The PRINCE2 Agile practitioner is 2.5 hours, it's open book, which is this book. PRINCE2 Agile PRINCE2 Agile guidance. You can, at the moment, until the end of September, you can use a PDF copy of that guidance on a second device if you so wish. And I did have that confirmed by PeopleCert last week. So they may extend it after September. It's due to the current situation with the coronavirus that they're allowing you to do that. They may extend it so you can have it on a second device. Pass mark for the practitioner is 30 out of 50, so slightly higher, 60%, and you must have either PRINCE2 Agile Foundation or PRINCE2 Foundation in order to sit the Agile practitioner. One more point on the exams: if English isn't your native language, you can have an extra 25% time. So you get 25% more time to allow for the fact that the exam is in English. The exam isn't available in other languages. Everyone I've spoken to who has done an exam in a language other than English, so done it in their native language, be that French or Spanish or Dutch, they all recommend doing it in English. So I'm just passing on a recommendation. It's up to you if it's available. There's the guidance. So that's what you want to buy. You can buy it from the Zindiac website, or it is available elsewhere. If you can find it cheaper elsewhere, buy it elsewhere. We charge roughly what Amazon charges, but you may pick up a cheaper copy. Certainly have a look on eBay or even Amazon for second-hand copies as well. You can quite often pick them up at a better rate. Okay, so as I said, what we're going to cover today is Agile, including Scrum, particularly Kanban and Lean Startup, and PRINCE2, and then blending the two together. So what is PRINCE2 Agile? So you can see there the actual definition now. We'll read it out actually. PRINCE2 Agile describes how to configure and tune PRINCE2 so that PRINCE2 can be used in the most effective way when combining it with Agile behaviors, concepts, frameworks, and techniques. And the reason I read it out was because you may see that statement or part of that statement in the exam. So you do need to be able to recognise it. But in simple terms, PRINCE2 is Agile. PRINCE2, one of the principles of PRINCE2 is managed by stages. A stage is a time box. We break the project, a PRINCE2 project, down into at least 2 stages, so at least 2 time boxes. So from that point of view, PRINCE2 is Agile. It's also focused on products. In Agile, we have a product backlog. We're focused on products. So lots of PRINCE2 is already Agile. But what PRINCE2 Agile is doing is giving us further guidance for tailoring PRINCE2, which again is a very important part of PRINCE2, that we tailor it. We don't just follow the guidance. The other guidance, this one, the standard PRINCE2 guidance, if I can work it out, there we go. Mine's the 2017 version, now known as edition 6 or 6th edition, PRINCE2 6th edition. So we tailor. We don't just religiously follow the guidance. We read the guidance, we understand it, we adopt it, but we adapt it to our project and our project environment. And that's PRINCE2 Agile is providing us with that guidance, with that help to do that. PRINCE2 and PRINCE2 Agile are for projects and nothing else. They're just for projects. They're about how to manage a project, i.e. change, improvement. I do prefer to say improvement. In order to improve, we need to change, but what we're seeking is improvement, not just change for change's sake. Agile can be used for projects and business as usual, and you will get a question on the exam that one way or another that makes sure you've recognised that and understood that Agile can be used for either, but PRINCE2 and PRINCE2 Agile is just for projects. And you can see on the table to my left the differences between the two. I'm sure that you don't need me to go through those particularly. I'll just make a note of the bottom one in terms of the degree of certainty or uncertainty. Clearly there is uncertainty in business as usual. Uncertainty is risk. There is clearly risk in business as usual. There's just more of it generally in projects because we are changing. So there's a greater degree of uncertainty. This is another important point as well. When we have, particularly if we have a new product, we will quite often have a development project to develop that new product. Whether it's a physical product or a digital product, it doesn't really matter. We develop a new product using a project. The project ends when it goes into production, but that's not the end of that product or service. It continues and it goes into a maintenance phase where we update it and improve it over time. And typically that update and improvement over time may be seen as business as usual. If there's a major change to the product or service, we may have another project to manage that. And very often the difference between business as usual and projects, whether the organisation determines that it is a project, it's about risk. It's very often about risk. So if the organisation feels that the change is just small incremental improvement without very much risk, they might just operations, business as usual, crack on and do it. Where they start to see more risk, that is when they start to say, okay, we need a project to control that uncertainty, that risk. If we don't control it well enough, we're less likely to be successful. And obviously that's what we're aiming for, that's what we want. So an overview of Agile. Agile means different things to different people. So rather like heavy metal, it covers a variety of different things. So certainly we can all name Agile frameworks and methodologies. Scrum, definitely. Kanban, Lean Startup, DSDM. There's lots of Agile methodologies. They share commonality. They share this many behaviors, concepts, techniques, things like time boxing, prioritization, product backlogs. Very often some form of stand-up meeting is involved. But nobody owns Agile. Nobody owns the term. Nobody's copyrighted it or can copyright it. So it's a general term that means slightly different things to different people. So we'll see shortly PRINCE2's definition of it, and we'll also see the Agile Manifesto, which is here. So the Agile Manifesto was probably the first time, or one of the earlier times, that a group of people documented what they meant by Agile. And again, I'm not going to read the whole definition, but I would point out that the things on the right are still important. They're just less important than the things on the left. And it always slightly annoys me that it says following a plan, responding to changeover following a plan. If we are intending to adopt an Agile approach, and if we are intending to respond to change over following a schedule, then that is a plan. So I think when they were writing that, they were really thinking of a schedule, because that manifesto is really a plan. It's saying we're going to value these things over those things. That is part of a plan. So the two generic approaches, if you like, are waterfall and Agile, or a linear serial approach and an iterative incremental approach. And the linear serial or waterfall approach, in simple terms, we do all the analysis, then all the design, all the build, all the test, and deliver everything in one go. In an iterative and incremental approach, we do a little bit of analysis, a little bit of design, a little bit of build, a little bit of test, and then deliver a little bit. And as we're moving through, you can see there's a slight overlap. So we don't do all of that and then go back to the beginning and start again. As we are coming to the end, is it on there? But when we're doing the design, we're already analysing the next bit. So there's lots of parallel working going on. But the key thing is we're delivering in small pieces. So we deliver as soon as possible. And the great advantage of that is until you've delivered something, the customer can't gain any benefit, they can't gain any value. So we can have done lots of great work, developed lots of great product, but if we haven't delivered it, the customer can't possibly gain any value from it. So what we want to do is deliver so the customer can gain value, and also give us feedback and maybe different guidance about what they want us to do next, what's important. And very often that's the most valuable thing, is the customer feedback, so that we get a more accurate final product. So what we're looking for is not to deliver what the customer thought they wanted at the start of the project, but what the customer needs at the end of the project, or as close to that as possible, with as little amount of rework as possible. So I mentioned these already. Agile can be viewed in many ways. Definitely time boxing is a key part of it, and if you're going to time box, you have to prioritize. So we're limiting the amount of time we've got. So today I've time boxed for 2 hours for this session, so I have to prioritize what I'm going to tell you within the 2 hours. A collection of techniques, and certainly things like user stories, story points that go along with that, prioritization techniques like Moscow, and using Scrum. Scrum is undoubtedly, in my experience at least, the most popular framework, and certainly in terms of delivering courses, I deliver more Scrum courses than anything else other than ITIL, which is service management, not project management. I'm just sorry, I've just noticed my, just let me adjust so you can do that with it. I think the size on the first slide was slightly different. There we go. Sorry, I just noticed it. My circle was cutting off some of the slides, so I do apologise for that. I thought they were all the same size. Right, so a very simple Agile overview. We have a product backlog. So the product backlog is everything we think we need to deliver, may need to deliver for the product of whatever priority. A time box or a sprint in Scrum terms. So time box, sometimes people get a bit confused with that. Sprint is just a specific name for a time box, in the same way as Mustang is a specific name for a car. There are other names. So sprint is just the Scrum name for a time box, in the way that stage is the PRINCE2 name for a time box. So for the time box, we look at the product backlog, and we, as much as we can, take the high priority items that we think we can deliver in the time box and put it into the sprint backlog. We then start trying to deliver it. As part of that, we have daily stand-up meetings in Scrum. They're called the daily Scrum. And at the end of the sprint, we deliver a potentially shippable product increment, and the goal should always be to actually deliver it. So there may be reasons why we can't, and often that's because the overhead of delivery is too great. So that's one of the things DevOps tries to address, is reducing the overhead of delivery so that we can actually deliver every sprint at the end of every sprint. Just one point I'd make here. So in Scrum, the sprint can be 1 month or less. They don't place a lower time limit. Typical guidance recommends 2 to 4 weeks. Certainly many, if not most, if possibly all, organisations I see where they go to week-long sprints aren't really doing this. They're not really being agile. So they say, oh yeah, we have week-long sprints. But what they mean is they do a week's worth of work. They're having stand-up meetings, and at the end of the week, they review what they've done. But there's no real prioritization of picking a sprint backlog and trying to deliver at the end of the week. It's just they're monitoring how much they're producing each week, which isn't the point of Agile. So just simply calling something a sprint or a time box and having reviews and stand-up meetings does not make you Agile. You've got to have a time box within which you prioritize, and you deliver the high priority items first. And if you can't deliver everything, you de-scope, so you don't deliver the lower value items. And when you start the next sprint, and this is really important, when you start the next sprint, you don't necessarily put into the next sprint the stuff you didn't deliver in the previous sprint. And if you're doing it properly, that'll occur really quite often, because you will have delivered something and the customer will say, that's great, I can get value out of that. The stuff you didn't deliver, well, that was lower priority anyway, and that's why we let you de-scope it. But it's even lower priority now because we've got the high priority items to do with that activity. And really what we want you to go on to is the next activity, the next area of the product. So do be careful with that. So a more comprehensive view of Agile, definitely a vision, an overall vision that we're aiming for, and I'll talk about the sprint goal, which is kind of the vision of the sprint, which is another important point, certainly within Scrum. Roadmaps and releases help really with communication with stakeholders in terms of letting them know what's coming. So in strict Agile, we're just saying, well, this is what we're doing in the next sprint. And in any future sprints, we haven't decided yet. We've got a product backlog, it's prioritized, so you can make your own judgments, but the whole point is they can change, and therefore the future sprints will change. And you may, in a new Agile situation, might need to be quite strict about that and want to give people less roadmap and releases. I did have one Scrum Master who came to me and kind of said, somebody in my organisation saying they want to fix the next 12 sprints. And it's like, no, clearly they haven't accepted Agile, and they're just trying to make Agile un-Agile and as much like waterfall as they can, because the organisation wanted to go Agile, and you really need to be quite strong and not do that. So you can have a roadmap, but it needs to be at a really high level, and you need to make it clear that it is flexible and can change. It can certainly be used in non-IT situations. Agile, as we've said, can be used for non-project work. It can be used for flow-based working, and really flow is about avoiding, one of the things flow is about is avoiding peaks and troughs, so those kind of mad periods of activity where we're desperately trying to hit a deadline. So we're working long hours, late nights, weekends maybe, and then maybe hit the deadline and then we need a break. And that's very, over a long period of time, that's not sustainable, it's not efficient and effective. So what we want is we want everybody to be committed, that's really important, but at a level that they can sustain forever is the idea. And we'll talk about a wider mindset, or the mindset, and culture is really important in Agile. I can't overstate how important attitudes and behaviours are in terms of it being successful, because you need trust, particularly with the development team. The stakeholders have to trust that the developers are skilled, knowledgeable and experienced and committed to delivering the maximum value. So if they do de-scope, that's not a bad thing. It's not because they're rubbish or they're not trying hard enough, or it's just stuff happens. Yeah. And also, and one of the things that happens most commonly is we're not very good at estimating. We, the human race, we're not very good at estimating. So that can happen, definitely. In terms of frameworks, I mentioned these. The ones we need to know for the exam are Scrum, Kanban and Lean Startup, and they are the ones we'll cover today. The other one in blue, which I will mention, is Lean, because it's applicable. It's so Lean's different from Lean Startup. Lean comes from Toyota, and it's about removing waste. And the number one type of waste we want to avoid on projects is rework, because that's the number one reason for projects going over cost and over time, is because we do some work and we deliver it and then we have to do it again. So we have to do it again either because the quality wasn't there, or we've done the wrong thing, or the customer's changed their mind and we have to do it again. And obviously anything we do again, you've basically doubled the cost in simple terms. So rework is a huge waste, and it's a major reason for going over time and cost, so we want to avoid it. Other than that, I won't talk about the others. The ones in red are IT only or predominantly, and the ones in blue can be used in non-IT environments. Although I'm looking at that, I'm thinking DevOps is really development operations. I think it probably can be used in non-IT environments, although it came from IT. So, along with frameworks, Agile has a variety of behaviours, concepts and techniques, and you can see some examples there. So something being collaborative, self-organising the development team, customer focused, empowered. So we need to empower the development team to make the decisions at the detail level, and that will definitely come up in the exam. So there'll definitely be a question in the exam about who has authority to make decisions at the detail level, which is the low level where the developers are working, and who can change the baseline, which is the more macro level, aligned to the business case, and that's where we'll need to go to a higher level of authority on the project. So whether that's the project manager or the project board or above them and to corporate, the customer or program management. And that needs to be defined clearly at the start of the project. So when we're starting up the project, we need to clearly define where the levels of authority are. Obviously, the more authority we delegate down to the delivery team, the more agile we're being. Working iteratively and incrementally, we've talked about prioritising what's delivered, definitely have to do that. Not delivering everything because we're going to de-scope. Inspect and adapt's a key part of Scrum. Kaizen comes from Lean, and it's really about making small incremental improvements. So obviously that fits very closely with iterative and incremental. And limiting work in progress, again, that's a helpful technique or concept for the development team to increase throughput so they don't task switch, so they're not trying to do too many things at once. Useful for the product owner as well. So ideally, the product owner would be dedicated to a particular project and full-time. That would be the ideal. Obviously, in your particular situation, that might not be possible. Techniques, burn charts up and down, user stories, retrospectives, time boxing, measuring flow, and we'll talk about those. So PRINCE2 Agile regards Agile as a family of behaviours, concepts, frameworks and techniques. And again, you need to be able to recognise that because that's very likely to come up in the exam. The first 6 questions in the exam are level 2 questions, so basically harder foundation questions, but foundation level type questions. So you absolutely want to make sure you get all those right. You don't want to kind of fail by 1 mark and have dropped marks on those easy questions at the beginning. And they're really just about recognising things like that, recognising the definition of Scrum, recognising the definition of Kanban, of Lean Startup from the others. So if you're coming to PRINCE2 Agile Practitioner from PRINCE2 Foundation, i.e. you haven't done PRINCE2 Agile Foundation, you might want to think about our PRINCE2 Agile exam prep app, because that's got lots of foundation type questions that will really make sure you can recognise all the definitions and so on, and will help with some of the questions. And it's a $4.99, so as I say, I'm not retiring to the Bahamas on it, but I do think it'll help you. So we're coming on to Scrum. How are we doing for time? Excellent, good. So Scrum, what is it? It's a framework within which people can address complex adaptive problems while productively and creatively delivering products of the highest possible value. So that's a great definition. Complex adaptive problems. If your problem's simple, you don't need a framework to solve it. And it's adaptive, it's changing. It's in a dynamic environment. The world, particularly digital environment, technology is changing, the world's changing at an ever increasing rate, so we have to be able to adapt to that. We need to be productive, but also creative. We don't just want to copy. We don't just want to do what everyone else does. We want to do things in a different way. We want to try and differentiate ourselves in the market, and obviously, fundamentally deliver the highest possible value. And that's really important in terms of the product backlog is ordered by value. When we create the sprint backlog, we try and take the highest value items. If we have to de-scope to meet the time box, we de-scope the lower value items, so values at the core. It's for developing and sustaining complex products. So we can use it on the project, we can also use it for maintenance or ongoing development and support of the product as well. It's got a collection of roles, events, artifacts, and rules, and we'll come on to those. It was created by two guys, Schwaber and Sutherland, in 1995, and they still have input. They haven't updated the guide. The guide is in the PRINCE2 Agile guidance, and that that is the latest guidance as well. It hasn't changed since that was published. But if you're in any doubt, you can go to scrum.org and or scrumguides.org and download the Scrum guide. It's only 17 pages of A4 long. It's really quite concise, and it's a way to assess and increase the efficacy, i.e. the effectiveness of our practices, so that you can improve. So that's important. It's the efficacy, how effective they are, not how efficient they are. We're focused on the effectiveness of them. It's founded on empirical process control theory, which itself really is based on the scientific method, i.e. making decisions based on evidence, based on data, rather than rationalism, which is essentially common sense, the idea of common sense. The problem with common sense is it's very often wrong. For hundreds of thousands, if not millions of years, human beings thought the earth was flat. That was common sense told them it was flat, but actually the evidence suggests it's not flat, that it's actually a sphere, or maybe a squashed sphere, and that the earth rotates around the sun rather than the sun going around the earth. So we do have to be careful with rationalism or common sense. It's remarkably often wrong. So try and make decisions based on evidence. And it covers 3 areas. So the 3 pillars of Scrum are transparency, inspection, and adaptation. And the transparency is important because in order to inspect, we need to have the data, the evidence available to us. So that's the transparency part, making the evidence available and being open and honest, not hiding things. And again, that can be a culture change for some organisations and some people. And it does require a safety culture, i.e. that employees, and particularly the development team, feel safe, that they feel able to make an honest mistake. So obviously nobody wants to make a mistake, but we're all human beings, we make mistakes. But we shouldn't be afraid of that. We shouldn't feel, oh no, I've made a mistake, I've got to cover it up, otherwise I'll get sacked. Or, obviously, if someone's making the same mistake over and over again, that's a different matter. But, so they should feel safe to make an honest mistake and learn from it, and that should be fine. That's all part of the transparency. Then we can inspect, and then from that inspection, we can adapt what we do in future and try and improve what we do in the future. And that process, really, you see quite a lot of sports people now in interviews after events talking about process and improving the process, and they're really going through the same sort of thing. I used to coach junior football, and we followed the same process for that. The Scrum team only has 3 roles. There are only 3 roles in Scrum: the product owner, the development team, and the Scrum Master. And the Scrum Master, although you may see job ads saying project manager stroke Scrum Master, they're really completely different roles doing different things. So the Scrum Master's role is very much Agile coach, and the Scrum Guide talks about the Scrum Master affects change to improve the productivity of the Scrum team. So generally, they're making sure they're adhering to Scrum, that they're actually using Scrum and not just kind of, as I said, not just having a sprint of a week and then a review, but not really prioritising within it and just using it to monitor work. So they're saying, are you really doing Scrum? And suggesting tools and techniques and looking at the culture and the interaction and so on. And I'm not saying the project manager can't do that, but they are quite different roles. The product owner owns the product backlog, the development team owns the sprint backlog, and I'll come on to that. They're self-organising, so they don't have a project manager telling them what to do. It's not a command and control environment. So if you're used to doing that as a project manager, if you're used to giving work packages to developers and saying, do that next, then it'll require a change of culture for you. So in an agile organisation, the development team are driven by the priority, which is transparent to them. And I did talk about that in part 3, about how important it is to decide how you as project manager are going to interact with the development team. So do watch part 3 for more detail on that. It's really important for passing the exam. It's really, really important for using Scrum or using Agile successfully in a project environment, that you've got that interaction defined and working efficiently and effectively. They're cross-functional. So yeah, we don't have analysts and designers and coders and testers. We just have developers who are able to do everything. So they'll have obviously strengths and weaknesses, as we all do, but everyone can do a bit of everything and do what we need to do. And the idea is then we don't have people sat around kind of saying, well, I'm a tester and there's nothing to test, so yeah, I'm planning testing. They can be doing something productive and helping the team. So which leads on, flexible, creative, productive. That's what we're aiming for. So the Scrum events, and there are 5 Scrum events, as you can see there, and the sprint is the kind of the container event. That's the main event. I probably ought to change that slide so that comes at the top, because the other 4 events all take place within the sprint. That's important to note. So sprint planning is within the sprint review and retrospective are within the sprint, and of course the daily Scrum is within the sprint. It says on the slide 2 to 4 weeks, that's common guidance. The Scrum Guide says 1 month or less. It doesn't place a lower limit on the length of the sprint. If we are going for a 1 month sprint or a 4 week sprint, then the first day, or it's limited to 8 hours, so a maximum of 8 hours, we have sprint planning. And all the durations for the events are maximum durations, except for the sprint itself. So the sprint is fixed. If it's 4 weeks, it's 4 weeks. It's not a maximum of 4 weeks. It is 4 weeks. And what we're looking for is repetition, to get a drumbeat going, so that the stakeholders know if it's 4 weeks, they know there's a sprint review and a sprint retrospective every 4 weeks. They know we're going to deliver a product increment every 4 weeks. They can put it in their diary and expect it and plan around it, and maybe operations or the people who are actually going to release it can plan around as well. Once we've done the sprint planning, I'll come back to that, but once we've done sprint planning, we go into the rest of the sprint, and we have the daily Scrum every day. That's limited to 15 minutes. Work our way through the sprint, and at the end we have the sprint review, sprint retrospective. Sprint review reviews what we've produced. Sprint retrospective reviews how we've produced it. In sprint planning, that's a collaboration between the product owner and the development team to produce the sprint backlog. The product owner owns the product backlog, and they are the only person who can modify it in any way, add to it, remove items from it, change prioritization. Anyone within the organisation who thinks the product backlog should be modified needs to go through the product owner. They have the authority from the organisation to own that product backlog, and it's really important in order for Scrum, for Agile to work, that they have that authority, that they're not constantly going off to someone else to ask for authority to make changes, that they're sufficiently skill, knowledge, and experience, but also they have the confidence of the organisation to make those decisions. In the same way, the development team own the sprint backlog. And the sprint backlog is slightly different because, as well as a list of products that we're going to try and deliver in the sprint, it's also their plan in whatever detail they feel they need of to how they are going to deliver that. And it also contains a sprint goal. And the sprint goal is, as I said before, is like the vision of the sprint. So a simple example would be if we're developing some sort of website to sell stuff, we need to accept a payment. We're going to deliver the payment functionality in this sprint. So our sprint goal is to deliver payment functionality. On our sprint backlog, we could have all sorts of product backlog items: accept Apple Pay, accept Android Pay or Google Pay, accept PayPal, accept Stripe payments, maybe Bitcoin, who knows? Yeah. When we get to the end of the sprint, if we have achieved our sprint goal, if we can accept payments, we've achieved our sprint goal. We may not have delivered every single backlog item. We may not be able to accept every type of payment, but we can accept payments. And that's a very good example of where, in the following sprint, the customer may well say, don't bother with the payment types you haven't delivered. We can live without those. We can accept payment. That's good enough. Crack on with something else. Okay, what we need now is we need video on the website, or we need product images or user reviews or whatever else they might want, chat support, whatever else they might want on the website. We need to do that bit of functionality next. At some point in the future, we might come back to more payment types because they may have worked their way up the priority list again because we've delivered more high priority items, but right now they're a lower priority. The sprint goal is also important when we come to the daily scrum. So during the daily scrum, it's a development team meeting. It's the stand-up meeting. It's only stand-up to help them stay within the 15 minutes. And during the daily scrum, we go around each developer, and each developer says, this is what I did yesterday to help the team achieve the sprint goal. This is what I'm going to do today to help the team achieve the sprint goal. And here are any impediments I can see to the team achieving the sprint goal. So you can see the sprint goal is really important for the daily scrum, because without it you can't do the daily scrum as defined in the scrum guide. So we do need to have a sprint goal, and I've seen some teams, this is really quite common, where they just say, well, the sprint goal is to deliver the sprint backlog, but it doesn't really encapsulate it. So do try to encapsulate it as more of a vision rather than just we're going to try and do the work. And do keep, if you're struggling to stay within the 15 minutes, do keep it that achievement focused on the sprint goal, not just activity. In terms of creating the sprint backlog in sprint planning, it is very much a collaboration. It's a negotiation between the product owner. So the development team want to deliver the high value items. They know what the high value items are because the product owners told them, because they're at the top of the product backlog list. They're more refined. They've been broken down into smaller bits. And certainly they need to be broken down sufficiently that they can be delivered within the sprint. What we need to think about is how much we break them down. So let's say our sprint's 4 weeks long. If we've got a backlog item that's estimated to take 4 weeks, we don't have any wiggle room. We don't have any contingency. If our estimate's wrong, if we've underestimated, we're not going to deliver it. The more we break them down into smaller bits, if we break them down and down and down, so we haven't got any backlog items bigger than a day's worth of effort, then we've obviously got a lot of contingency on each item, depending on when we start it. But that may be wasted, a different type, we may have wasted effort breaking them down if the developers just come along and say, those 5 backlog items are all to do with the same thing, I'm going to put them together and work on them as one unit. So we don't want to break them down too much. And really that's one of the things I would be reviewing in the sprint retrospective is, are we breaking product backlog items down to the optimum size? Yeah, are we breaking them down too much or not enough? If we don't break them down enough, we're increasing risk. If we break them down too much, it could be wasted effort, and we don't want to waste effort. Yeah, we want all our effort to be adding value. As I said, when we get to the end of the sprint, we have the sprint review, and the attendees of that are the Scrum team, i.e. the product owner, Scrum Master and development team, and any stakeholders invited by the product owner. And we review what's been produced, and it's the first opportunity for stakeholders and or the product owner to guide the development team in terms of what they're going to do next. So it's really the start of sprint planning. In the sprint retrospective, it's just the Scrum team, no one from outside the Scrum team, just the Scrum team, and they're looking at their own efficiency and effectiveness and the tools and techniques and behaviour on the team to try and improve it for the next sprint. The Scrum artifacts, so I've mentioned 2 of those already, well, all of them already really. So the product backlog owned by the product owner, the sprint backlog owned by the development team, and we've produced the increment. And the reason it's called an increment is because we're delivering incrementally. So we deliver the first increment, and then the second increment is additive. It adds on to the original increment, and it's getting bigger. The way I think of it is we're delivering Lego bricks. So each sprint we deliver a Lego brick, and it's complete, or several Lego bricks if you like, but they're, if you're looking at each individual product backlog item, but they are complete. We may not be able to release them because possibly we've delivered some Lego bricks that require some more Lego bricks around them or connected to them, and we're delivering those in future sprints. But they are complete, and the important point about them being complete is when we deliver the later Lego bricks in sprint X+1, X+2, once they come along, there's no work to be done to change the ones we've already delivered. We're just adding them on. Yeah, there's Lego brick, oh, there's another Lego brick, put them together, now we can release them. And it should be that really minimum overhead of a very simple integration. That's what we're aiming for. Artifact transparency. So I mentioned transparency has been important before. So the product backlog, the sprint backlog, the increment, they are transparent. They are available to everyone, to all stakeholders within the bounds of information security. So obviously you've got to comply with the information security requirements of your project, and there's a whole spectrum of those. But as much as we can, we want them to be transparent. So whether the product backlog's held on a whiteboard or in an Excel spreadsheet or an IT system like Jira, as much as possible, it's transparent. It's available for all stakeholders to see. So they can go and talk to the product owner. So they can say, why is this product backlog item down here? Why have you got this as a could have? I think this should be a must have. Or why is that a must have? It should be a should have. Or how, depending on how they prioritized it, it should be higher, it should be lower. Oh yeah, I know I asked for that 6 months ago, but I don't need it anymore. I forgot to tell you. It helps with all those types of things, having transparency, and also it avoids rumours and suspicions. You know, it avoids that kind of, oh yeah, it's not going to deliver your thing, that project anymore. Now they've cut it. You know, and maybe I'm joking, who knows. But we can see what's still on the product backlog. It's clear to us. Sure, I thought I was going to sneeze. Right, yeah. So that is Scrum. So as I said, Scrum is the most popular framework within Agile. Undoubtedly, it's the core of the time boxed technique. Do pay attention that when you have a time box, that you set a goal for what you're going to deliver in that time box. You don't extend the time box, and if you need to, de-scope to make sure you deliver something of value within the time box. And from a PRINCE2 Agile point of view, as I said, watch the third part of this series, but make sure you as project manager define how you're going to interact with the development team, i.e., are you interacting with the product owner or are you the product owner? If you're not the product owner, how are you interacting with them? How are you influencing what the priorities of the development team are? Okay, so we're about halfway through and not quite halfway on time, so we're making good progress, and we're coming on now to the second Agile method, which is the Kanban and the Kanban method. So Kanban are visual management systems. The term Kanban is a Japanese term, or based on a Japanese term that means visual card. It comes from lean methodologies, and it's a way to increase agility, to help us improve day-to-day decision making. So it's very useful for the development team who are making those day-to-day decisions, those lower-level decisions. It helps with deferral of commitment, so it's enabling or helping us make decisions at the last safe moment. So generally that's what we want to do. If we leave decisions until the last safe moment, it's giving us the maximum amount of time to gain information which will help us make those decisions. Notice I'm saying last safe moment. We don't want to leave the decision making so late that it becomes late, or worse, we don't make a decision. And almost always, if you don't make a decision, there's a default decision. So the way I think about it is, you drive along on the motorway, a sign comes up on the motorway saying jam ahead, traffic after, hold-ups, delays after the next junction. So you've got to make a decision of whether you come off at the junction or you stay on. And maybe if someone's with you, you just, oh, should we come off? Should we stay on? How bad will it be? Oh, I'm not sure. What's Google saying? What's Apple saying? You're looking on your sat nav, and but you've got to make a decision. If you don't make a decision, the default is to stay on. So you, oh, what should we do? What should we do? What should we do? Oh, well, we've missed the turn off now, so we'll have to stay on. And whether that turns out to be the right thing to do or not, you can't do that in business. You can't just let things happen. We don't want events to be controlling us. We want to be controlling events. So if we make a positive decision and it turns out to be wrong, then we can review, in our retrospective, we can look and say, well, we made this decision based on this data and it turned out to be wrong. In hindsight, it turned out to be wrong. How can we improve if we're in that situation again? How can we improve the decision? What do we need? Additional data? Do we need to interpret the data in a different way? Maybe give one piece of data more weight, or a piece of data we gave too much weight, give it less weight. But try and improve decisions, and that's very much at the core of modern management. Really, is trying to improve decisions going forward. And it can help reduce lead time, because the limiting work in progress part of it helps with task switching. And you kind of need more than one thing to do. If you've only got one thing to do, there will be times when you're waiting on something else or someone else. So I've written some code, I've set it to compile, it's going to take 5 minutes to compile, I've got 5 minutes free. All right, I might go and get a coffee or something, stretch my legs, but maybe I can do something else. If it's longer than 5 minutes, if I've sent something to someone else to review and it's going to take them a couple of days to review, and I can't do anything until they've reviewed on that particular work item, I need something else to do. So we do need multiple things to do, but not so many that you get into task switching, which is, I'm working on this, but I haven't done anything on that yet, so better do something on that, or better do something on that, better do something on that, better do something on that, and that becomes inefficient. So the limiting work in progress helps with that. And yeah, Kanban in PRINCE2 is applicable to project time boxes because PRINCE2 is only applicable to projects, as we know. So we're going to cover the 6 general practices of the Kanban method. And the first one is visualize. It is a visual management method. And really, this is shown as a very simple Kanban board that you can draw on a whiteboard. What I would say about using a whiteboard for Kanban is it can be great for a development team. So if you've got maybe about a dozen backlog items, not very many more, it can work really well. If you've got many more, so it works good at a sprint level because your sprint backlog might be around that sort of, a dozen, maybe 2 dozen at max. If you've got more than that, I'd question whether you're breaking them down too much. What you don't want is updating the Kanban board to become a job. It shouldn't be anyone's job. It shouldn't take any significant amount of time. So at the daily scrum, when we're stood around the Kanban board, we can update it then, or obviously as people complete work, they can update it, but it should be an insignificant amount of time, whatever method you're using. So whether you're doing it on a whiteboard or you're doing it in Jira or other software tool, however you're doing it, it should have the minimum management overhead. That's what we're aiming for. It shows what we've got to do. It shows what we've done. It shows how work's progressing. From a project manager point of view, I really like it because over on the right hand side, the done column, if there's nothing in there, you can just very nicely kind of say, guys, to the development team, guys, you haven't done anything. Nothing's done. Oh, but we've been really busy. Yeah, I know you've been really busy, but you haven't done anything. You haven't delivered anything yet. We need to deliver, and you don't want to leave delivery until the end of the sprint. So it's always a balance. If you've got some big backlog items, you probably want to start them towards the start of the sprint because that's going to give you more contingency if they take a bit longer. But equally, if you just start big backlog items at the start of the sprint, you're going to go a long time potentially before you deliver anything. So you need kind of that balance between having some small backlog items so you get something delivered early, which will give people confidence both within the development team and external to the Scrum team, the stakeholders. That gives them confidence we have actually delivered something. We're not going to get to the end of the sprint and have delivered nothing. But equally, start the bigger, more difficult stuff fairly early on, so we've got a bit of contingency. So you just need to balance those two things. But again, Kanban can help you with that to see what you're working on, how much is in build, how much is in test, how much is deployed, or and obviously on this chart they've got ready and done, i.e. ready to be deployed, and obviously for this team the definition of done is deployed. It may not be for a different Scrum team. The definition of done might be unit tested, ready for integration testing, because we've got several Scrum teams and we're integrating their work output. Ready is ready to be built, so sufficiently well defined and estimated and prioritized, very importantly prioritized, that a developer can take work. And that's the key thing, that it's a pull that developers pull work to them. Limit the work in progress I've talked about, so we don't try and do too much. We don't task switch, and it does underpill the pull system I just talked about. So no one is allocating work to anyone. So you as project manager are not allocating work to developers saying you need to do this, you need to do this. They pull work to them when they feel able to do it, when they feel they've got capacity and capability to do it. And that's something where the Scrum Master can help and, trying to make sure that they are committed. But hopefully we're, like I said, they need to be skilled, knowledgeable, experienced and committed. Scrum requires that, really. If you've got people who aren't committed, you're going to struggle. But then why have you got them on the team? Why have you employed them if they're not committed? Why are they there? In the nicest possible way. We need to address that. Kanban avoids scheduling work at specific times. So again, that's really in line with PRINCE2. PRINCE2 says focus on products, i.e. not activity, and delivering value. And that's what we're doing. Pulls work when capacity exists. One thing you do need to look at is, in terms of capacity existing, is who the best person is. And one of the things you might look at a retrospective is if there's a piece of work that only one member of the team can complete, they're a specialist in a particular area and we've got an area, do we just keep letting them do that area of work, or do we take the hit on a particular sprint to say we're going to get someone else to do it with their support? It will take longer, but going forward we'll then have two people, so we're losing that kind of single point of failure. Again, people need to feel safe in order to do that. If I've got something that only I can do in a volatile environment, if I feel my job's under threat, or that's protection for me, they can't get rid of me because I'm the only person who knows how to do boom, boom, boom. So I have to feel safe in order to share that knowledge. So that's important. Again, the safety culture. And I've talked about task switching and multitasking. It avoids the negative effects of that. It helps the team manage the flow, so we can manage the flow that work is moving through the flow. It's moving through at a nice rate. So we're analysing, developing, testing, delivering. It's not getting bogged down. I used to work as a coder. I'm never particularly keen on testing. I think that's quite common. But we need to do it. It needs to be done, obviously. And we don't have a test team. We can't just kind of go, there you go, test that. There you go, test that. We're doing it. So we've got to make sure each bit of the flow is getting appropriate amount of focus. Waste is removed as quickly as possible. I talked about avoiding waste and particularly rework. And the worst examples I've seen are Scrum teams where, because they're under pressure to deliver everything off the sprint backlog in the sprint, and they don't feel safe to de-scope, which is what they're supposed to do if they can't deliver to the required level of quality, what they end up doing is delivering everything but not to the required level of quality, and then they get lots of bug fixes come back. And the worst cases I've seen is where they have a sprint which is literally just fixing bugs. So no one's perfect. You're almost certainly going to have some bugs at some point, but they should be really a low level. If that's a significant number, then the two things you've got to look at is, one is, and I'd look at this first, are the development team under too much pressure to deliver too much in the sprint and not able to de-scope and deliver the high quality? Check that first. And then obviously the second thing is, do they have the skills, knowledge, experience, equipment? Are we doing everything we can to help them be successful? But yeah, remove waste quickly as possible. Making policies explicit. So having a definition of ready, having a definition of done, defining what we can take into build and how much we can take into build, when we can put it into test, when it is tested, what constitutes tested, who can do that. So it's those sorts of policies, and as it says, they evolve over time. So they're very much working agreements, policies that we can review in the sprint retrospective. Implement feedback loops, and we'll talk about feedback loops again when we come on to Lean Startup. They are very important. Ultimate value being delivered is judged by the final consumer. So how do we get the feedback from the final consumer and try to quantitatively assess it as much as we can to determine what's going to be delivered in the future. Because what we think is valuable, the customer might have a different perspective on. So we might think something's really important, the customer might think it's not that important. Something we think's not that important, the customer might think it's really important. So we need to have that feedback so we can modify and try and deliver as much value as we possibly can to the customer. Improve collaboratively as a team and evolve experimentally. And experimentation, creativity is a key part of Agile. And partly it's because we're not sure entirely how we're going to deliver the solution. The more uncertainty there is on the project, the more applicable, the more useful Agile is going to be. So if we're really sure what we need, and not just in terms of what, but how we need it delivered, Agile is less useful. If we've got sort of a vague idea of what we need in terms of what, and we've kind of no idea how, that's where experimentation, creativity really comes to the fore, and where the time-boxed approach really works really well. So we are going to spend one sprint on a spike, on a prototype, an experiment, to see if our idea for how we might deliver this thing is going to work. And that's what we're prepared to risk, really. So we might spend a sprint, deliver a prototype to the customer, and the customer turns around, yeah, no, not so much. Don't want that. That doesn't meet my requirements. Can you do it in a different way? And as I said before, it's very much based on the scientific method. And the final statement, process improvement is everyone's business every day. So it's very much the opposite of if it ain't broke, don't fix it. It might not be broke, but we can always make things better, and we're always trying to make things better. But most improvements are just going to be small incremental improvements. So we don't need to make big, huge leaps in terms of improvement. Just small incremental improvements is what we're looking for. Further guidance. So Scrum Ban is something that really didn't need inventing in my idea. You can use Kanban with Scrum, that's great. I don't think we really need to give it a name, but you can if you want. Policies may exist for similar work items to make things more predictable. And as we talked about in the last slide, really, the team can look to improve by carrying out experiments in a controlled, objective way, often referred to as sandboxing. And the reason it's referred to as sandboxing, if you haven't come across that, is it goes back to kind of children playing in a sandbox, and the idea is when they're young, if they play in a sandbox, the sand's soft, so if they fall over, they're just falling on soft sand, so it's a safe environment for them to play in, is the idea. So we want experiencing a controlled, a safe environment, and we obviously need to define what that is for our product. Cumulative flow diagrams are a means of measuring the flow and seeing how things are progressing through the Kanban board, through the flow. And you can see on the kind of spreadsheet to my left that the columns are basically from the Kanban board, and the horizontal difference between the lines shows the time it takes for an item to progress through the system, and the vertical difference shows the number of items in the system on any one day. If you get a question on this, in terms of the foundation exam, that's basically all you need to know. In terms of practitioner exam, obviously, if you get a question on this in the exam, it's an open book, so you can go to the book to check. The other thing I would recommend is going to our pre-recorded videos and watching the video on CFDs, because I've done some kind of nice graphics and zoomed in, and it's just easier to. So if you didn't quite get what I just said, watch the pre-recorded video. It's just something that's easier to do on a pre-recorded video rather than doing it live. So I do recommend watching that if you want more information. The slide says a time box, i.e. a stage, can be run with or without sprints. That's kind of one of those strange things in the manual. So a sprint is a time box. So it's kind of saying a time box can be run with or without time boxes. What it means is a higher level time box can be broken down into lower level time boxes if you wish. So we can break the sprint down into lower level time boxes and call them sprints. We can also break the stage down into low level time boxes called releases, and then break the releases down into low level time boxes and call them sprints. So we can break things down as much as we want and give them whatever names we want. And really, that's down to you as project manager. And providing, on a PRINCE2 principle, providing you have two stages, at least two management stages, an initiation stage and a delivery stage, how much you break it down and on how many levels is entirely down to you. You just need to specify it at initiating a project stage, in the initiation stage, so everyone knows what you're doing. Kanban aims to reduce the cost of delay. Change to existing processes should be gradual. That goes back to the Kaizen, small incremental improvements. And Little's law, the average number of items in the system equals the average arrival rate times the average time an item spends in the system. It's kind of a manufacturing thing. Again, you've got the book if you need it. The guidance if you need to refer to that. It's used for forecasting. Okay, so that was Kanban. I was keeping an eye on the time. I'm just going to take another quick drink. I do apologise that I keep scratching my nose. I don't really know why it's so itchy today. Hopefully it might stop and give me some relief. Right, okay, so we're coming on to Lean Startup. Lean Startup was created by Eric Ries, R-I-E-S, and he's written a book. If you go to Amazon and do a search for it, you can buy the book. It's not particularly expensive. It's a book for entrepreneurs, for people starting a business. And really the core of the book is he recognised that many entrepreneurs have a great idea. Oh, I'm going to start my new business and it's going to be great. We're going to have this great product or service. And the issue they have is they start to develop it and they do some development on it. and it's not quite right. I need to do some more. I need to make it better. It's not perfect. I don't think it's perfect. So I'm gonna make it better. I'm gonna make it better. I'm gonna make it better. And maybe they never get to releasing it. It's still an idea or it's in development, but they never actually get to the point where they release it. Or they do release it, and they'd release it, and their customers kind of go, yeah, not so much, not really keen, not very good on it. And they've wasted a huge amount of time that they could have used making it better, making it what the customer wanted instead of what they want. So what it really encourages is getting something in front of the customer as quickly as possible. So build something, a minimum viable product, and release it, get in front of the customer so we can measure their feedback, we can get the data from their feedback, learn from that, come up with some ideas to improve it, build them in, release those. So it's very much an iterative, incremental approach to delivering value to the customer. It deals with uncertainty, works particularly well in uncertain situations where we're not sure what the customer wants. So in those new, innovative areas of business, the disruptors, it works really well for them. And it's aiming at shortening or accelerating the feedback loop, i.e. from getting feedback from a customer, how quickly can we apply it and make the change and improve our product and make a difference, and trying to shorten that time frame as much as possible. And obviously in a competitive environment, if we can do that much quicker than our competitors, that's a real significant advantage. I know in the retail market, the worst case retailers, and to be fair, many of these have either gone out of business or are going out of business if it's this bad for them. But the clothes they're selling today, or if they're bringing a new item of clothing out into a store and putting it on a hanger for the first time, it started development a year ago. So their lead time from idea to being in a store is a year, which is clearly far too long. And like I said, they've either gone out of business or they're going out of business very quickly. Even the best ones, it can be several months, shall we say, but they're trying to reduce that as much as possible. So if we have an idea, we can get it to market as, and most, if not all, product manufacturers, whether they're producing clothes or cars or whatever it might be, are trying to reduce that lead time from idea to production. And obviously the best ideas come from the customer, because they know what they want. They're the people we have to serve, not ourselves. Key points. If you're going to fail, and clearly we don't want to fail, we want to succeed. So the best outcome is we deliver something to the customer and they go, that's great, that's what I've always wanted. How did I ever live without it? That's what that's our ideal situation. But if you're going to fail fast. Yeah, so spend a minimum amount of time building something, get in front of the customer, get that feedback, and if it's not what they want, then do something different. Yeah. So particularly if you're in IT, one way that I certainly do this is early on, I'll sit down with the customer and maybe around a whiteboard and sketch things out on a whiteboard. So I'll say, this is what you've told me. This is what I'm thinking of delivering for you. This is what it'll look like. We'll have a screen like this. It'll look like this. You'll hit this button. You'll enter there. There'll be this. Is that what you wanted? No, you've completely misunderstood me, Matt. I don't. All right, okay. Well, let's rub that out. Yeah, so I've failed fast, but I've spent very little time and effort failing, and then we can hopefully succeed and have that conversation. And that's an important point about the minimum viable product. So at that point in time, the minimum viable product for me is a sketch on a whiteboard. Once I've got agreement for that, then I go away and produce a prototype in code, which I can do now much more easily than I could in the past. little bit like building with Lego bricks. I can pull something together quite quickly, but probably maybe hasn't got all the error checking, maybe isn't necessarily got all the connectivity to back-end databases and third-party systems. But the front end probably is a pretty accurate representation, maybe some hard-coded values in, maybe limited data. And I can go to, and that's the minimum viable product for the next stage of feedback. So at each stage, you can have a different minimum viable product. So this is not just one thing, but it's a version of the final product which allows for the maximum amount of validated learning with the least effort. So that's the key thing. And it may not go into operational use, and clearly a picture on a whiteboard isn't going into operational use. Releasing frequently helps with metrics, that's fine. And a pivot, so a pivot is a major change. So a pivot is we thought we were going to do this, but we're pivoting and we're doing something really quite different, quite a different approach to whatever we thought we were going to do. So Uber nearly did that, but I think they backed off from it. So they were obviously providing cars, taxis, and there was talk about them pivoting to providing bicycles, but they've just sold, certainly in the UK, they've sold their bike arm off. But whether that's they're just changing their name and they've sold the old name off. But potentially, yeah, you get pivots like that where they choose to do something completely different. Yeah. So. Okay, so that's the Agile part done. So overview of Agile, obviously it covers various things. We've covered 3 specific things in terms of Scrum, Kanban and Lean Startup, and they're the 3 you will need to know for the exam. So for the foundation, you kind of need to know the terms. They're straightforward level 1, level 2 questions. Our app will really help you with those. For the practitioner exam, the way they tend to like to question is they'll give you a little scenario and say, and the team did this, or the project manager did this, or the product owner did this. Is this an appropriate use of Agile? And they give you 2, so they give you 2 yeses and 2 no's. So yes because, or no because. If you get that type of question, which is very common, try and decide between the yes and no yourself. So is this an appropriate use of Agile, yes or no? Don't look at the rest of the words because that'll just put you off. If you, whichever one you decide, then read the stuff after because and decide between the 2. Obviously, at that point, if you kind of feel, well, they're both wrong, you might need to go back and revisit your original decision. But if you come up with a good answer, then you can avoid reading 2 of the answers. Because they may contain truthful information. One of the major reasons people get questions wrong in the exam is because they see a statement that is true and think, oh, that's true. Yeah, that must be the right answer. No, just because an answer is true does not make it the right answer. It must be true, but it must also answer the question. And they certainly have answers in the exam that are true but don't answer the question and therefore are the wrong answer. So always, as well as saying, is this true, say, does this answer the question? That's one of the major reasons people get questions wrong in the practitioner particularly. So we're coming on to PRINCE2 and we're going to do a recap of PRINCE2. So we're going to recap the themes, the processes and the principles, and starting with the themes. So you can see the themes there, and the themes are really they're areas of projects that we need to focus on. So we'll start with the business case. So the business case, it aligns with the principle of continued business justification. So all PRINCE2 projects must have continued business justification, and that is documented in the business case. The minimum requirements for the business case are defined in the guidance, and they're not too onerous. Fundamentally, the benefits from the project must outweigh the costs. in simple terms. Yeah, so the costs avoided must outweigh the costs imposed, and the risks removed must outweigh any risks imposed on by the project. So that's fundamentally the business case. We're going to make things better. As I said, we're trying to improve. And the business case theme just looks at how we do that, and making sure that we review it regularly through the project. And obviously the business case will change perhaps more dramatically in Agile because we're adopting this incremental, iterative and incremental approach. So we're delivering on a regular basis. That can affect the business case because we've delivered something, we've gained some value, we've delivered something, we've gained some value, which is great. The customer's gaining value from what we've delivered, but we may reach a point where we say, okay, we've delivered 80% of the value in maybe 50% of the time. Is it worth continuing to deliver 20% more value? Or from an organisational point of view, would it better to take those resources and get them going to do a different project and deliver kind of the 80% of value in 50% of the time on that project instead? And that's where Agile, when we come on to blending, Agile can really filter up to organisational portfolio management level. Talking of which, organisation, the organisation theme, how are we organised? And as I said, this is key to your success on the project, getting the organisation right, and in particular on an Agile project, your interaction as project manager with the development team. And do you have more than one team? So do you have several Scrum teams with several product owners and you're interacting by the product owner? Or do you just have one development team and you are the product owner? But obviously you've got to have that authority from the organisation. So what authority do you have from the organisation to make decisions? What are you delegating to the development team? What do you need to go back up to the project board to get authority for? And PRINCE2 doesn't tell you. It just says you need to make that clear. You need to know what it is, and you should review it. Is it working? And one thing I always say with delegation is, if the people you've delegated to never come back to you asking for authority to do something or asking for guidance, you may have delegated too much authority to them. May have. You might want to review it. Equally, if they're coming back to you constantly, several times a day, if not several times an hour, you haven't delegated enough authority to them, or there's a sweet spot in terms of delegation, so that we need to look at that and be aware of that. Quality. So quality, we don't want to reduce quality. We need to deliver the quality required by the customer. Very often our customer doesn't say, here are my functional requirements and here are my quality requirements. They just say, here are my requirements. They do align with each other. They are expressed in similar ways. They're prioritized. They need to be prioritized. So in the same way as we can prioritize functional requirements or scope, we can also prioritize quality requirements. And very often there's a range of quality that is acceptable to the customer, and we need to balance those out. So for instance, just to give you an example, this very video I'm currently recording with a 1080p webcam. The reason I'm using the 1080p webcam is when I tried to do it last week, I tried to use a higher quality webcam, but I think that was part of the problem was that my laptop couldn't process the higher quality image and stream it and do everything else it needed to do. So I've reduced the quality slightly of the webcam of the picture of me, which you might be quite happy with if I'm a bit blurry. But hopefully that'll help with everything else, with the syncing of the sound and so on. I'm just looking at, it's not too bad, maybe a little bit out. But yeah, it's a balance of quality and what was prepared to accept and what we're not prepared to accept and so on, and obviously related to time and cost as well. And in Agile, obviously, we're fixing time and cost. We're not expanding it to improve quality. So it's the quality we can deliver, the best quality, the most amount of value within the time and cost allocated. Plans. Within PRINCE2, we have two mandatory plans. So we have the project plan is mandatory. We must have a project plan. Again, PRINCE2 gives you lots of flexibility around what your project plan looks like, but you've got to have one. And you must have a stage plan. And it is the stage plan that the project board signs off and gives authority to the project manager to deliver the stage plan. So the principal managed by stages, the project board manages by stages by giving you the project manager authority to deliver the stage plan. Delivery plans are optional. So delivery team plans are optional in PRINCE2. If you're using Scrum, as I said, the sprint backlog includes the plan of how the development team are going to deliver the sprint. So from a Scrum point of view, really, the delivery plan, which is the sprint backlog, is mandatory. So we just need, that's the plan. That's what we're thinking about with the plans theme. The risk theme, risk is just uncertainty, and it can have a potentially positive impact or a potentially negative impact. Classic example, when you take the certification exam, there is uncertainty about whether you will pass or fail. The pass is obviously the positive impact, the positive outcome, the opportunity. The fail would be the threat, the negative outcome. And what you try and do is do everything you can or reasonably can within time cost constraints to increase your chance of passing and the positive thing happening, and reduce the chance of the negative thing happening, the threat happening. And that's very much what what risk is like in business. You know, there's a positive outcome, there's a negative outcome. Let's try and make the positive outcome happen. Different from in the business case, we talk about benefits and disbenefits. So benefits are things that we expect to happen if we deliver this project according to the plan. We expect to get these benefits, and we also expect to get these disbenefits. So there may be some negative things that we expect, such as reduced efficiency while the customer gets used to the new product, for instance. But they're really things we're expecting. So with a low level of uncertainty, there's obviously still some uncertainty, but fairly low level. So in terms of probability of them happening, it's very high. Whereas risk, what we call risk, is there's a greater degree of uncertainty. So the probability of them happening is lower. Change, obviously, change is key in an Agile project. Agile recognises and embraces change, expects change. So does PRINCE2, but they both see change as inevitable. As I said, in the exam, there will definitely be questions asking you to understand the difference between detailed change and at the lower level that can be handled by the development team because you've delegated that authority to them, and baseline change, which could affect the business case, which they need to either escalate to you as project manager, or you as project manager need to escalate to the project board, or maybe even the project board need to escalate to corporate, customer, or program management if you're part of a program. So it's important to know where the authority for change sits. The project board may delegate authority directly to you as project manager. They may have a change authority as well. So it could be that they say, right, you as project manager can authorise change up to £10,000. Anything above 10,000, below 100,000, you can go to this dedicated change authority. Anything above 100,000 needs to come towards the project board. And I've just used money there because it's easier to understand, but that would go on any type of change. So whether that's scope, quality, time, cost, and it would be based on all those things. Obviously, on an agile project, time and cost are going to be fixed, but it was just for an example. So changes about how we manage it, who's authorised to approve it. And finally, progress. So we do need to manage progress. We need to manage progress because that, when we look at progress in the past, that gives us a very good indication of progress in the future. Scientific method, empirical process control, very much agile, based on evidence, what's going to happen in the future. And that will obviously affect plans, affect the amount of risk we think we've got, and affect the business case. So if we're delivering more than we thought we could, if we're making more progress, that could affect the business case positively. If we're delivering less, if things are proving more difficult, we're delivering less value, again, that could affect the business case, and it might mean that we no longer have continued business justification. We need to stop the project. Hopefully we're delivering successfully, and maybe we'll get more, be asked to do more, we might get more money, who knows. It could be expanded in some way, but we need to have that view. So progress is all around how we monitor that progress. And obviously in an agile project, we can use things like burn down charts, burn up charts, and so on. And we cover those on parts 2 and 3. So they're the PRINCE2 themes. We now come on to the PRINCE2 principles, which several of those I've mentioned already. Continued business justification. So from the very start of the project, we must have continued business justification. We must have business justification to continue the project. If at any point we haven't got business justification, then we need to stop the project. Clearly, I mean, this is where fail fast might help us. If we're going to fail, we want to fail early. We want to, it's much easier to stop a project when you haven't really spent much time or resources on it. If you're some way in, if you're several months, if not years in, if you're several hundred, if not millions of pounds in, it's much more difficult to stop. But if there's no longer business justification, that is what we should do. And it's our responsibility as project manager, if we believe the business justification no longer exists, to raise an exception with the project board and say, we think you should stop this project. The business justification no longer exists. And it could be because we've been successful. It could be because actually, as I said, we've delivered 80% of the value for 50% of the cost, and actually the 20% of value remaining for 50% of the cost, that doesn't stack up anymore. So we've actually just been really successful, and but we need to have that agility. We need continued business justification. Learn from experience. Obviously, that is helped by sprint reviews and sprint retrospectives and end of stage reviews as well. So basically at the end of every time box, whether we're calling the time box a sprint or a release or a stage, we have a review, whatever we call it, whether we call it sprint review, sprint retrospective, release review, release retrospective, or a stage review. We're reviewing and we're learning and trying to improve going forward. It's an important point about lessons learned. Big mistake organisations have often made, certainly in the past, is running a project and going all the way through the project, maybe months, years, and getting to the end and then say, oh, we need to learn lessons. And they come up with this big, long, huge list of lessons to learn, and they document them, and they put them on a drive somewhere in filing cabinet somewhere. And then the next project starts, and they go, oh, we must learn lessons from the previous project, and they get this big long list out and go, oh, it's too much. We need to crack on with this project. It's just too much to deal with. Whereas if we're learning lessons at the end of every sprint's not very long, we're not going to have a big long list, hopefully, of lessons to learn. We might just have a couple of 2 or 3 things to learn and try and improve on, and we can handle that. We can handle that. I think a great example is Microsoft Office. Microsoft used to release a new version of Office kind of, every 3, 4, 5 years. And there'd be a huge list of new features, and people went, "Oh, I can't cope with that. I'll just carry on using Excel how I've always used Excel." Whereas now with Office 365, they do release very often, at least once a month, if not once a week. Very often but it's just like one new feature, and I can cope with that. Oh, new feature in Excel. I'll never use that. I can ignore it. Oh, that's really good. I've been waiting for that. I hadn't even thought about it, but yeah, that's great. I'm going to learn about it now. It'll just take me 5 minutes, and then I can use it. I can cope with that. So there's small incremental improvements. Little and often. Little and often is the key phrase for learning from experience. Define roles and responsibilities. People want to contribute, they want to help, but they need to know what their role is. They need to know what their role is. They need to know what they're responsible for and what they're not responsible for. Prior to the Super Bowl, I was watching some NFL videos, looking at previous Super Bowl winners, just to see what makes a successful team, what made this team successful. And I saw Bill Belichick's team talk before the New England Patriots' first Super Bowl win. And basically what he said to the team was, do your job. Do your job. You know what your job is. You know what your role is. You know what your responsibilities are. Focus on that. Do your job. If everybody does their job, we will win. And, win for them is successful project for us, or a win on a project is it's successful by the criteria we defined, and that's what we want. And key to that is people knowing what their roles and responsibilities are and delivering on them, and not trying to do other people's. Yeah, and again, we need trust for that. So defining roles and responsibilities is really important, and particularly, as I keep saying, who's the product owner and how do you interact with them if it's not you? Managed by stages, I've mentioned several times. A stage is a time box. It limits risk. So our project may last years, but a stage lasts a shorter space of time, and the project board only gives the project manager authority to deliver a stage. So it's limiting risk to a certain amount of time and a certain amount of cost. It's a very agile approach, and the only question is there any tolerance on the stage? So if you're going more agile, you would have no tolerance on the stage of cost or time. It'd be fixed. If you've been less agile, you could have tolerance on there. And again, that's, as we'll come on to when we talk about agile, it's not a binary decision of are we going agile or not. It's a question of how much. So stages are absolutely, they're time boxes, they're absolutely agile, they're core to PRINCE2. It limits risk in the same way sprints limit risk to a sprint. And they provide a predefined point where we're going to review business justification and decide whether we go on, whether we continue with the project as we had expected to, continue with it in a different way, or stop it completely. But again, you don't have to wait to the end of the stage. If there's no business justification, we can stop it at any point, or change direction at any point if that's the appropriate thing to do, by raising an exception, which brings us on to managed by exception. So managed by exception is all about supporting delegation. The project board delegate authority to the project manager within tolerances on time, cost, scope, risk, benefits and quality. On an agile project, time and cost tolerances may be 0, and the project manager delivers within that authority. If at any point you can't deliver, that's when you need to raise an exception. So the exception might be we're not going to deliver the benefits, or we can't deliver to the required quality, or we can't deliver the required scope, even using the tolerances that I've been given. So we need to replan, or I need some more guidance. In the same way, you as project manager, one way or another, delegate authority to the delivery team, either via a product owner or you are the product owner, and give them tolerance. And again, that's the detail. When we talk about detail change, when they talk about detail change in the exam, that's what they're talking about, is the delivery team, basically. What decisions can they make without raising an exception, and what decisions if they notice a change that's a baseline change, as that's the term they'll use in the exam, baseline change, that's where they would need to raise an exception where they say, we can't deliver within the tolerances you've given us, so we're raising an exception to you as a project manager. And then that may or may not still be within your tolerance. If it's within your tolerance, you can make the decision. If it's not, you would raise it to the project board. And if it's within their tolerance, they can make a decision. If it's not, they would raise it up to corporate, customer, or program management. And again, we'll come on to this, but when we're starting up the project, initiating a project, we just need to define those things for the 6 aspects. At what level do we need to escalate to the next level up, or as we are passing it down, what authority are we delegating down? And we can change that. It's not fixed at the beginning. We're just defining it at the beginning, and that at any point during the project, we can improve, we can learn from experience and change any of those tolerances, any of that delegated authority. Focus on products. The key product being the project product. So in PRINCE2 terms, the project product is the thing we are delivering, the customer relationship management system, the enterprise resource management system, the app, the whatever it is, the digital transformation, whatever the vision. It's kind of like the vision, but it's the highest level, the project product. And then we break that project product down into smaller products. In Agile, you quite often come across terms like epic and user story. So you might have, at the top level, you might have vision, or sometimes saga, sometimes customer journey. Doesn't really matter what terms we use, but we need something at the top that defines the aims of the project, what the project is delivering at a high level, and then break that down. And the main thing is just that everybody knows what we're talking about, so have a common language. So if your company's adopted PRINCE2, you'll probably use the terms project product and product descriptions. But if you're in a more agile environment, you might also use user stories as well. They may be interchangeable with product descriptions. But that's what we're focused on. We're focused on the products, the value of the products, and delivering the products. And obviously everything we've talked about in terms of product backlog, sprint backlog, which contains products, and delivering the product increment is all about focusing on products. And finally, tailor to suit the project. And I've talked a lot about tailoring. I've talked a lot about guidance. PRINCE2 6th edition, one of the big changes from 5th edition is that it provides, tailor to suit the project's always been in there, but 6th edition provides much more guidance on what you can tailor and what you can't. So for each of the themes and for each of the PRINCE2 products, it's management products, PRINCE2 gives you guidance about what's mandatory and what you can tailor. And you can tailor an awful lot. It gives you a lot of freedom. So if you're ever working on a PRINCE2 project and someone's saying, no, we can't do that, girl, the book says you've got to do this, the book says you've got to do that, it's at least worth checking the book, because it probably doesn't. It does tell you you've got to do some things. There are some mandatory things, but it never says it's got to be this big, it's got to take you this amount of time. It gives you lots of flexibility in terms of how you do it. So we've got 12 minutes left and we are coming towards the end. So I've just fairly quickly go through the PRINCE2 processes. So we've got 7 processes there, 7 themes, 7 principles and 7 processes. They like 7. I think the marketing people decide 7 is a good number. The project starts with a project mandate that comes from corporate, program management, or the customer. So that could just be an email. It could even just be a conversation of, we think we need a project to address this problem. Can you start? And that goes to the project executive. And the project executive will start up the project. The project manager may get involved there as well, and you can see that starting up a project on the slide is split between directing and managing a project, and it's maybe referred to in other methodologies as pre-project or sprint zero, and it's really the minimum amount of work we can do, because we don't want to waste, we want to be lean, want to fail fast if we're going to fail, hopefully we'll succeed. Minimum amount of work we can do to say, is this project worthwhile? Is it worthwhile? And is it doable? Are we capable of doing it? So is it achievable? Is it worthwhile? Is it achievable? Out of that, we produced, it doesn't say on the slide, but we produced the project brief, and the project brief goes to the project board, so the project executive, senior user, senior supplier, and into the directing a project process for authorization to initiate the project. So we've said, basically, hopefully we've said, this project, we think it's worthwhile and achievable, can we initiate it? And we, as part of the project brief, we have an initiation stage plan. PRINCE2 must have at least 2 management stages, an initiation stage and at least 1 delivery stage. If we get authorization, then we go into the initiating a project process, which takes place during the initiation stage. So just be careful about those if you're not used to PRINCE2. There, we're setting the foundations for the project, and I've mentioned this a few times here. You're talking about how you're going to communicate, how you're going to do risk management, what your approach is, what your approach to organising the project is, and also, most importantly, you are creating your plan, your project plan, or refining the project plan, and creating the plan for your first delivery stage. Towards the end of the initiation stage, the project manager, we move into the managing a stage boundary process, where the project manager presents a review of the previous stage. So we look back and look at how the previous stage has gone, the stage we're currently in has gone, but presents the plan for the next stage and asks the project board for authorization to deliver the next stage. The project board, in directing a project process, so in the same meeting, in the meeting where I'm as project manager, I'm presenting the plan for the next stage, and the project board are reviewing. We're in the same meeting. We're still in the initiation stage. I'm in the managing a stage boundary process. They're in the directing a project process. Yeah, they give me authority for the next stage, and that's the first delivery stage. And then I go into, as project manager, go into controlling a stage, where I'm interacting, I'm collaborating, I'm directing product delivery, so the delivery team, the scrum team, and I've talked about the importance of defining how you're going to do that. The scrum team, the delivery team, work in managing product delivery, they interact with me, they deliver products back to me as project manager, and controlling a stage, I'm checking quality. And when we come towards the end of that stage, if there's another stage, we're into managing stage boundary process again, where I present the project plan for the next stage. And ultimately we get to the last stage, the final delivery stage, and then rather than going into managing a stage boundary process, we're going to closing a project process, which is very similar, except rather than presenting a plan for the next stage, I ask for authority to close the project. And in terms of plan, I just need to show that any subsequent work has been handed over, or we know who we're handing over to, so we know where it's going, we know what's happening post-project. So any risks that exist, we're handing them over to operations. Probably most importantly, any benefits that we haven't yet achieved, who's going to take responsibility for those? And typically it's either the customer, so operations, or an external customer, or possibly program management. If we're part of a program, the program, although the project may be finishing, the program may be continuing, and the program may take responsibility for realizing those benefits. Yeah, just very quickly, we'll do mention it later in the course. The delivery team in managing product delivery, they issue a checkpoint report to kind of say how they're doing to the project manager, and the project manager issues a highlight report to the project board, and they are time-based reports, so they're produced on a timely basis, so once a day or once a week or once a month, whatever timing is agreed between the two parties. Okay, so we're nearly there to the finish. We've just got 5 minutes left, so we're blending and finally get onto the layer cake that I promised you for the blending. And you can see there the 3 layers within the project. It's the same layers as we just saw on the last stage. Delivery layer at the bottom, managing in the middle, direction at the top. They've drawn it as a cake because it's agile and they like to be a bit wacky. But agile thinking rising up and PRINCE2 control thinking cascading down. And what we're trying to do is blend the philosophies of both. PRINCE2 is pretty agile, as I said. It's got time boxes, it's got focus on products, it's got delegation of authority, but maybe it's not been seen as too agile in the past. But we just want the strengths of both, and we just want an appropriate amount of control. And in my experience, whatever your level is within the organisation, so whether you're kind of at the bottom and you have no one reporting into you, or you're the top and you're the chief exec and you report into the board, what the entity you report into, what the person or entity you report into wants to see is that you are in control of the things you have responsibility and authority for. Not that you get everything right all the time, because that would be unrealistic. Nobody can do that. But just that you're in control, not events are in control of you. And that's what the blending's really all about. So what does PRINCE2 Agile comprise of? It comprises of behaviours, focus areas, techniques, concepts and frameworks, and we cover those in parts 2 and 3, which are available on our YouTube channel. Please subscribe if you haven't already. The 8 guidance points, I'm not going to read them all out. I've mentioned the 8th one. Using Agile isn't a binary decision. It's not do we or don't we. It's about how much. There will be a question on the exam on those 8 guidance points. So, it's a mark to just, you don't necessarily need to memorize them word for word, but you need to be able to recognize them when you see them for the exam. So do spend some time on that. Yeah, so beware of prejudice. I think people who come from a PRINCE2 background tend to be really positive about Agile. People who come from an Agile background and haven't seen PRINCE2 before have maybe heard bad things about it because it's been badly tailored or not tailored. But there's nothing wrong with PRINCE2. PRINCE2 is great when it's used correctly, when it's tailored correctly. Like I said, it is Agile. There's nothing in PRINCE2 that restricts your agility at all, other than bad use of it. Yeah. So don't be a bad workman and blame their tools. The tool is good if it's used correctly. So what's coming up in the later stages is the PRINCE2 journey with Agile. So in the guidance, they refer to it as the PRINCE2 journey. That's the process. That's going from starting up a project, through initiating a project, through the delivery stages to closing a project. They're referring to that as the PRINCE2 journey, and we talk about how to use that. Coming up in part 2, which we've already recorded, but is there for you, available. We cover fix and flex of the 6 aspects: time, cost, scope, benefits, risk, and quality. Nearly forgot there. and the 5 targets and the 5 focus areas. So they're coming up, and I'm just looking at my watch. It's coming up to 6 o'clock, so that is the end of my time box. I will just click on to the next one because that's the hexagon, and that's the core part of PRINCE2. So that's what's covered on the second part. So don't miss the second part. That is really important. I hope you've enjoyed today. Thank you for joining me. I hope you all see me again soon because you'll be watching more of our videos. Look out for new ones, new live streams. Do subscribe, and then you get notified when we release a new video, and we will be releasing new project related ones as well as service management related ones. Until then, thank you very much for watching and have a good evening. Goodbye.